Hey guys, this is Alex from Wilkinson Audio. I think when we left off, we were just finishing tracking bass guitars, and now we're going to move on to the vocals. I'll just kind of show you where we're at here. I have the guitars muted because we'll be redoing those. They don't. This is just pre-pro, but I'll point some things out about guitar tracking. And like if you watch the video that where I was trying to mix the guitars, it was somewhat difficult. And I was talking to the client, who happens to be my friend, and it turns out it was actually two people playing it, like just alternating kind of, because they were both just writing it. And that's something that maybe new engineers might not know, is that when you're tracking guitars, it's generally better to have one person. Hang on, I'll just adjust the focus here. Oh, there we go. One person track all the guitars so that they match. And it just makes it so much easier to sit the tone in the mix and stuff like that, especially for this kind of production where you really want it to all be perfect. For like proper tracking for something like this, where we have MIDI drums and MIDI bass, we need perfect guitars. So you're probably gonna end up, even if you could play it really well, you'd probably want to riff build it, like almost like, phrase by phrase, note by note kind of thing, just to conform the sound of the guitars to the rest of the mix, to have them fit in completely. And sound right at home, which obviously the guitars we have now are not doing that. And the vocals we're about to work on, just a disclaimer, are not the final vocals by any stretch of the imagination, and they have that same characteristic where there's been shortcuts taken. They've tuned some notes pretty hard, and I think created harmonies basically by tuning, just because they're just writing it and getting it all down. And I'll kind of point out some tips and stuff for vocal tracking while we're mixing it. And I guess I'll have you guys hear the mix. It's changed a little bit. I've just been doing some EQing and changed a few things. The two main ones I think are, I'll just play it back here. Two main things are the snare. I put the threshold down so it has more snap to it. So it's got a lot more punch on the snare drum now. The snare drum really pops. That's one of the big changes. And the other is I've EQ'd high pass and low pass, the global reverb, to keep it from building up mud. And you can see how that's kind of done. So now the global reverb is it's adding a sense of space. It's just thickening up the body of the mix as well. So that's kind of where we're at. We have all of our MIDI stuff sitting well, which is good. I'll have to do another video when we track the guitars for real. I imagine it'll probably end up being me tracking it. And I'll show you the results of that, and we'll redo the guitars again. And probably as well the vocals. But for vocals, I'll just mix what we got here. Just kind of to show you guys kind of some stuff you could do with this. You can already hear the sound of the vocals. Like if you want this style of vocal, like if this appeals to you, this is how you do it. And we'll go through the structure of it right now. So a big vocal sound, very pop vocal sound. The first thing you're going to notice is there's a lot of layers to it, and this is essential for that sound. You can't get this sound without a bunch of takes, takes of the same performance. So that's essential. Otherwise, it just won't work. There's no way to fake it. It's like double tracking guitars. Like you can use stereo enhancers all you want, but there's nothing like the actual sound of just having the tracks that you need to do it. And so what they have here is they have the lead center vocal, and then two doubles that can be panned left and right. And then this is the same thing. This is just kind of another vocal, so it's again center, left, and right. These two would be the kind of out front main lead vocals. And then these woes are like a pad almost, like I think they've just tuned these into some harmonies, and this will be more like a background kind of pad sound. which they've obviously created for writing by tuning it and stuff like that and coming up with something they liked. And these are octave unders, which I think are also pretty important. They really add a lot of thickness and size to the vocal, and that's just where you sing it, but an octave down. And I'll show you what that sounds like. A new beginning, I can't wait for us to go back to the way things do. Sounds like there's some harmony and stuff in there as well. A lot of times it'll just be an actual just octave vocal below the main vocal, but they've done some cool stuff. And that's the components that we're going to be working with. So to start off, we'll just compress it, which is basically what I always do. I always just, compression EQ is basically 90% of any sound, really. And then the rest is just, just stuff like delays and reverbs and everything. So we'll just start with the obvious, and we'll just compress and EQ it for now. And then, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do with delays and whatnot, which I'll be using obviously the basic delays that come with DAW, which are kind of boring. That's one thing throughout this project that I've realized is that it's nice to use. The nice thing about plugins and stuff like that is they're good for creating sounds. They're very good for coming up with new or different sounds easily and quickly. So it is handy to have plugins for like workflow related things, because it's kind of a pain trying to use these delays that don't really sound good and trying to fiddle with them until they sound good, instead of just taking a delay that just sounds good from the bat and just moving on. It does take a lot longer to do it this way, because you really have to fiddle with some of the stuff to get it to sound good. Okay, so let's try to figure out how I should do this. I will do the center vocals separate, processing for the center vocal separate than the doubles. And I don't think I'll hard pan the doubles, because I'll probably pan them like 75 or something like that, because if you hard pan them, then they're going to be in the space of the guitars. This will actually make them a little more audible if they're not totally panned hard. That's another thing about like overheads and stuff. If you pan them like 80-80, it'll make your guitars sound wider, and it potentially could make the overheads clearer, because they're not in the same space exactly. It's kind of hard to explain, but you can add clarity by panning and ensuring that in the spatial mix that things are in the same positions. It generally will add some clarity. So keep that in mind. Center main. All right, so let's start by checking this out. I don't know what they use to track this. It sounds okay-ish. I'm trying to find a new beginning. If they hadn't murdered it with auto-tune, I'm sure it sounded okay, but whatever. Oops. Okay. Compression first. Pull it reacomp. And drop the threshold. Just solo for now. So we had to hear the reverb, so we're going to put the ratio up and we're going to crush it. Okay, and then we're going to put these to 0. The attack we're going to turn up till we can hear the sibilants coming through that we kind of want, so it sounds cool and good. So let's do that. 22 is cool, and then we'll work on the release and turn that up till it sounds cool. And that sounds awesome. And we'll just do like 8-to-1. We'll go for, most modern vocals are about 12 dB gain reduction. They can be anywhere from like 10 to 20, but they're usually, to me, I think they're usually around 12-ish. And I'm going to high pass a little bit, because I think there's some low end in there that's causing it to kind of pump and trigger when it shouldn't really be. That's okay. You might be able to get those settings better, but we'll go with that for now. And we'll EQ this. Try I don't know if that'll be necessary. That might be a mistake right there. Like, it does have kind of a resonance there, but it might be fine in the mix. All right, so that sounds cool. And we'll add that to our folder track as well with the two backups that are reinforcing it. And we'll also, actually I usually do EQ before compression generally, so I'll switch that around. Okay. And mute this other stuff. And we're dealing with something similar to the guitars where we're gonna have to find ways to separate out all of these sounds so that they can all be kind of heard, but they all sound different, which is again another challenge when you're just using the stock DAW plugins. It's kind of tricky to make stuff sound really different because sometimes plugins have kind of a sound of their own, which helps. But with this, it's like you gotta find creative ways to do it. So I think we'll leave the out front vocal fairly unprocessed for these doubles and stuff. Let's experiment with these and see if we can come up with some kind of cool sounds and like maybe some choruses and some delays and stuff to just kind of make them sound bigger and fancy. Nah, I don't like that at all. So let's just work on some delays. I don't know if there's any presets here that would work. I think they're mostly pretty bad from what I remember when I've tried them before. Okay, let's just make some delays here. So might need some de-essing, which I can show you how to do real quick here. I don't know if there's a de-esser in here. Oh, it looks like somebody did make one. Let's see how well this works. I can barely hear if that's working or not. I'm not really sure. All right, I'm gonna try something different because that doesn't seem super effective. This is the multi-band compressor that Reaper comes with. So we can see that S sound is mostly in this band, and we'll just clamp down on it. Get rid of auto makeup gain. And we want to back it off till it doesn't sound like he has a lisp. This could be a problem, actually. Because we don't really want it clamping down until there's the S sound. So let's see if we can There's nothing we can do about that. Guess that's about as good as we're gonna get. I just don't want to kill the top end of the vocal too much. Alright, well, that'll have to do for now. We'll throw that on the main vocal too. It's not that bad of an S sound anyway. Like, it's not the end of the world. I just don't want it getting out of control. I'm thinking that that cut that we did down here is not needed. It's not going to be needed because I think we want that body. And then you could also do a lot of parallel compression and stuff as well on this, which we'll do as well. See if I can make these delays a little more obvious. So imagine this, but with a much nicer delay and stuff like that. On this delay, it's nice you can high pass the delay so you don't get a lot of muddy buildup. And again, it's a good idea to do the thing where you gate this out so that the delays don't go on forever. Because that's not terrible. But if you have long delays and stuff like that, they do get very muddy. So you should use this to key a gate to itself to cut that when the dry signal ends. Cut the reverbs and delays and stuff like that. It's nice to leave the center vocal unaffected because then you have some clarity and it's easy to hear what he's saying. So I'll probably just leave it like that for now. And this track is again the same thing, same processing that the main track would have essentially. They do come in under each other though. You'll notice that this one starts before that one ends, and you could either deal with that with some volume automation or something like that, or which is probably what I would do, is I just dip it down. I do volume automation on these ones here to dip them down probably when this one starts. Would be one solution to that. You could probably do another solution with panning or something like that if you wanted to. If you wanted to, you could make them sound different and stuff. That'd probably be the most interesting. You could have this one be like wide panned or whatever, or have this one be less in the center and wider, so that it just sounds like there's a stereo spread coming in. So you could do something like that if you wanted to. I probably won't, just because we're not going to end up actually using these. And I'm just kind of demoing to you guys kind of what we could do here with these stock plugins. And then we'll get to stuff like the woes and stuff like that. And these will need some reverbs and delays and stuff to get sounding right, I'm sure. Let's have a listen to these. that's a ping pong delay, so it goes back and forth in stereo, like left and right or whatever. And that's going to be handy to add some movement and interest to the sound. And I'm going to take the low pass filter and try and get rid of that. You hear that initial noise? Let's try and get rid of that. Well, there's a few ways we could try and get rid of that. Apparently that's not going to work, so we'll just do something like this. Actually, we don't need to do that. Fade it in. And this should, I think, do it. And I'm going to put the delays before the compressor. To make them a little more prominent, but keep them under control. And for this ping pong, I'm going to start high passing these at like 700 or something like that. Well, actually, let's do like 300, just to make sure we're not getting a bunch of muddy delay stuff, because that's a lot of delay going on there. I'm cool with that. That's sounding pretty cool. We could also do something with Rhea pitch. I've seen people do stuff like this, where you just take, you just shift things by about 10, well, a couple cents, and then you just pan it one way, and then you shift things by something like -2 cents, and then you shift it the other way, and you do 4 cents. And we'll keep it shifted the same way, so we're not waiting, we're not waiting one side to be flat and one side to be sharp, so we'll adjust them. And -4 and like that, and we'll see what this sounds like. That sounds cool, and we could do more of that if we wanted to. I'm gonna put that before the compressor. I don't think it makes a difference though. And I'm gonna check the compressor's threshold, because it's really clamping down on that, which might be something we want. We might just want to sausage this out so that it's just a constant kind of sound. Let's see. It's kind of a pain to get it to sit, but that sounds okay-ish. I think we'll actually turn our attack back up. That sounds more natural and better to me anyway. So that's kind of an interesting sound that we just made there. Yeah, let's see what that sounds like with the rest of them. And we could also do some, like, we got to put these in different ranges too, so that they can all be kind of heard, or at least felt. But even if you don't know what it is, like, it's still nice if you want, so if you mute it, you can tell it's not there. So let's try and put this. We also don't want this interfering with these main vocals. So we probably don't want it to have a lot of this frequency, because that will make it difficult to hear, as well as down here, I think will make it pretty hard to hear. So we probably want to get rid of frequencies that this other one is in, if possible. So we'll just kind of dip out the mid-range here. And we'll add a bunch of air and high end. Okay. And then low backup chorus. Actually, another thing, these sound kind of thin. Another thing we can do is we can take our pitch thing here, and we can add another shifter, and we'll move it down 12, or well, let's just do 1 octave. Negative 1 octave here, and then we'll play that back. And we can adjust the volume of that. I don't know if you can hear that. I'll solo it. It sounds really weird on its own, but then it sounds really cool. I shall put re-pitch before the delays. That sounds pretty cool. And if we get rid of that, you can hear how it's thin. Again, don't always just add things for the sake of adding things. It sounds bigger by itself, but it still has to fit the mix. This might fit the mix better without this added octave down, even though it does kind of improve the sound as we're hearing it. You know, the guitars might take up that frequency, and we might end up with a bunch of mud doing this. So, you know, be careful with be careful with always just making things bigger. It doesn't necessarily mean it sounds better in the mix. There's some odd tuning issues there, you can probably hear. So I'm going to kind of process these weird, because I want these to be, again, totally different. We'll probably just use our trusty wave shaping distortion and see if we can get these to be kind of weird and stick out. Another thing you can do, if you're ever wondering how to do that telephone effect, there's an easy way to kind of do it here. We can just do it with Reefer, and just do this points flat. 300 to 3K is, I believe, the range that telephones classically reproduce. And if you play this, it'll sound like it's telephone. And just tweak to taste, I guess. That's, you know, a little too heavy-handed for this probably, but we're kind of doing the same thing. You can kind of see. I'll probably do the ping pong thing as well for this one, just to give it some movement and space as well. Where's that one that we did that on? Was it this guy? The woes? Yeah. The other thing we should do is we should add our reverbs for the ones that are further back and stuff like that. So these woes should be probably the furthest back because they're the most like a pad generally. They're almost like a choir thing. You really should have some kind of nice reverb on them. this is the reverb I have to work with. Yeah, obviously use a nice reverb if you can. That sounds good. This is what I got, so we'll go with it. You can do initial delay of 15 milliseconds. Often sounds good because then it puts them kind of 15 feet away from a wall-ish before. Well, it's hard to explain, but initial delays generally on 15 milliseconds is a good bet for a lot of them. It's hard to explain exactly what it does, but it can potentially add clarity because it separates the reverb from beginning until the transient is almost hit or is done, so it doesn't like smear your transient. It's, yeah. In this example, it probably won't make much difference, but you might hear it on like a snare or something like that, and it might sound better. Again, we have to be careful with our high passes and stuff so that we don't make mud, because it's very easy to make mud with something like this. We do not want mud, because that yeah, and especially for something like this, so it's not that integral to the mix. Like we don't want something small like this ruining our mix, so be careful that this stuff doesn't get out of control here. And so we'll use the same kind of reverb, and we'll put it in in this as well, but we'll back it down a bit. We'll make the room size smaller, and we'll just make it less wet than that one is. So we got these kind of fighting for frequencies, so we'll have to carve these out and stuff like that. So let's see what we can do with this one, because this one's getting pretty big. Yeah, we'll have to, and also the volumes are a little off here because this is going to be a lot quieter. So let's balance these out here so we can get an idea of what this is actually sounding like here, because this is meant to be audible, so we're going to balance it with this. Should go back to the way things used to be. It's not gonna be the same. That sounds kind of cool. Should go back to the way things used to be. It's not gonna be the same. This one's kind of getting out of hand, so it'd be nice if we could just limit this a bit. It likes to kind of move around and stuff because of all the delays and stuff like that. So we'll use this thing. And as long as it's always limiting the signal, it means it's going to basically keep it as a sausage. It's just going to be a brick of sound, which is easy to sit. Another thing you can do is you can apply stuff just to, not even to the track, but just on a per item basis. So just do Shift E or Show Effects, Chain for Active Take, and then we'll do that telephone thing. It's kind of cliche to do this effect. It's been done to death, but just to show you, you could do something like this here. Just to add interest to this last part. And then, you know, it sounds kind of cool. And there's some tuning issues kind of on these ones down here. So we can do that same thing again and just affect these parts. And we'll just tell it to do some automatic pitch correction. I'm pretty sure the song's in C minor. And we'll just crush these to C minor so that they're not really heard. Well, this part kind of is. We'll see what happens. Stuff that's in the background you don't really hear, it's usually okay to do this. To really hard tune it just to, because they don't really hear what it is anyway, so it's usually okay to tune harder the lower in the mix something is, and it won't be obvious. It'll just kind of make things sound a little more solid and in key.
I'm trying to find a new beginning. I can't wait for us. To go back to the way things used to be. It's not gonna be the same without you.
All right, so that sounded kind of cool, and we definitely have to check if this fits the mix at some point here. I'm pretty sure it'll be okay. We'll do that in a sec. Let's do some. Remember what I was talking about, where you don't necessarily, don't have something in the master bus because you're mixing through it and you don't really know if it's optimal. I just totally did that on these vocals and mixed through this EQ for all of them. This EQ is not drastic, but yeah, be careful of that, because if I had some really weird EQ on here, I could have totally just destroyed or wasted all my time. And this is the bus track, so there's just a bit of mud there, and other than that, I think it's okay. Sorry, it's having trouble loading all this stuff off of the hard drive, because I'm actually just running this whole project off the internal hard drive, which is not the best idea. Usually you'd want to run this off an external hard drive and you'd have less of that kind of problem. So anyway, speaking of the master bus, let's do some compression. And we'll do some parallel compression here I think we'll do the type where we do it pretty heavily slammed and then mix it in, like the wet dry thing, parallel processing. So let's do that. And that sounds kind of weird, but when we add the dry in, it should be okay. It's gonna level everything out a bit and kind of give it some life, because it's almost like doing its own automation. As we're feeding it all these tracks and stuff, you can see the threshold, like as it adds more tracks in, we're feeding more signal to it, and it's clamping down harder and less hard depending on what's playing. So it's almost like someone kind of riding a fader almost. It'll have an interesting effect. Let's just blend the dry in and see what it sounds like here. So that's kind of cool. I mean, yeah, obviously you could do a little bit of a better job of this and clean things up and take care of a lot of those clicky transients that are kind of coming in when he's doing like K sounds and stuff like that. You could even do that manually just by doing what we did there, where we actually just faded in and stuff like that to kind of help those. But this is generally how I would process vocals. I'd probably spend some more time on it and make sure everything sounds cool. Let's just see what this sounds like with the rest of the mix here before calling it a done deal.
I'm trying to find a new beginning. I can't wait for us to come back. Wait for us.
And this is how, you know, you'd have to EQ this one differently because this is a different singer. So you'd want to, you know, do separate EQing and make sure that all works out. But checking in mono is always a good idea. All right, so I think that does it for this section. That's kind of a cool process of mixing vocals. So hopefully that was informative for you guys. And I guess the next step is we'll retrack and get the real vocals and the real guitars in here, and I'll do these sections again with the actual, or maybe I'll just do them and then point out what I did, and then yeah. And I might use real plugins. I might use these stock ones still. I'm not sure. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. So thanks for watching, and have a good day.